and I had the chance to chat a little bit in August. You're in Manhattan after PFL, the lightweight semifinals. You'd already qualified, of course, for the final a couple weeks earlier in San Antonio, and you're basically the only one walking around this venue, middle of Manhattan, theater in Madison Square Garden, in a cowboy hat, which you have on right now.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
you explained, as I understand, that you grew up in Florida and your nana's place was near a rodeo. That's the backstory, as I take it. But you always loved cowboys and all this kind of thing. The cowboy hat's still relatively new for you. So where did this come from? Where did the look come from?
Yeah, so the looks new, but I guess you could say like when I was a kid, I kind of grew up like countryside, and so there's a place called Okeechobee, Florida. I was born in Fort Lauderdale, but when I was young, we moved to Okeechobee, Florida. So my nana's house is like you could look out the backyard and there's a rodeo. So I would kind of watch and notice, like see the cowboys, everybody kind of getting ready. Super countryside. We lived off this dirt road, and ever since I was little, like I never really kind of wanted to leave that place. I've always loved farms. I've loved ranches. You know, my papa, he had a bunch of chickens, and it was one time he had a pig. So kind of grew up around it. My mom, when she was in Africa, she lived on a farm as well. So it was always like saying I wanted to have my own farm and ranch one day. So when I fought in San Antonio, I bought my first official hat, and I used to wear one every once in a while, like gosh, way before I was even in any major organization. Like first three fights every once in a while, then I messed it up. But it's kind of for me, it's like inspiration and just like a reminder that one day I want to have my own ranch. And last year, for about a year, I was living on a farm in Doral. So it was cool. I used to have like a working hat and all that stuff, but I wanted like a fancier dress one. And right down the street from the hotel we're staying in on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, that had a really famous hat store called Paris Hatters, and they hooked me up with a great hat, and here you are today. It goes with me everywhere.
There you go. Yeah, obviously you brought it around New York, and like I said, you kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. There's nobody in New York wearing a cowboy hat. So,
Yeah.
um, but obviously now you are this one win away from $1 million PFL championship. So obviously there's a big prize money involved. There's also the championship involved. You get kind of twofold here. I recently saw how, and you remember thinking to yourself, thank God the UFC cut me
Yeah.
after your win in June. Take me back to your mindset earlier in your career if you can. And a lot of young fighters, they get transfixed on this idea of they've got to get to the UFC, right? It's kind of like it's the thing everybody wants to do. A lot of young fighters do this. Is this something you were thinking in your first year as a pro?
It's kind of funny. I guess I had a different upbringing into fighting. It was yeah, the UFC at that time was, major for me, right? And I think it was World Series of Fighting, and then you had Bellator. But I started training martial arts or anything when I was 24 years old. So for me, like getting to fight anywhere would have just been cool. I wanted to stay active and fight. So, I was an amateur in college. I was finishing up college football, finishing up college, about to graduate. And I walked into the gym and said, well, if you want to pay your gym dues, you can fight. I was like, when's the next fight? It's like 3 weeks. Took a fight in about a month's time. And golly, I was like 235-pound football player, had to cut to 184. Did that in about a week. It was terrible. But it's so many different things. I'm gonna do this forever. And I fell in love with it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Like my focus is to be a champion when I'm a pro one day. Or if I do accounting, I'll just fight underground and, be an accountant and fight underground. I just love to fight. I love the martial arts. I wanted to challenge myself. So it wasn't necessarily so fixed on the UFC. I could have cared less if it was the UFC, Bellator, if it was World Series of Fighting at the time. I think PFL was, about to be like its thing. But all I wanted to do was fight and stay active and one day become a champion if that there was ever an opportunity. And here we are today.
Sure, but you got to the UFC very quickly. Obviously, you had two wins on Dana White Contender Series. Not the most common of things, but the one win. The next year, you come back, you win again, you get the contract, right? This happened for you very quickly. It was what was it? This your second year as a pro, I believe, right? So
Yeah.
how did you get so fast tracked if that wasn't even the goal?
Shoot, I get pretty obsessed with things. If I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna go all the way in it. So I was like, and I talked to my parents. So I had a really good accounting job, like really, really good, as in a fintech company called Avid Exchange in Charlotte. I started technically working there when I was 20, but I was doing an internship like 19 and all that stuff. So it's kind of on a fast track to work with the company. And they're super awesome. They're very supportive. Even until this day, they're still like I get people who reach out. Even the CEO is still super nice and been following my fight journey. But when I was finishing school, and the next step is to get your master's, go into getting your CPA. And I told my parents, like, I had my first amateur fight, and I was starting to work already after college, and I was able to go to practice and leave early, but they were about to switch my schedule and give me a promotion. And then they would have started paying for the CPA and everything. And but then they told me I couldn't train at the same time. And that's when the pros would train. So I wanted to train with the pros. So I talked to my coach, Coach Jimmo at the time, and I said, hey, like a really good opportunity in counting, and I can go far in this, and they'll pay for all the schooling. But I think I really want to fight. I mean, it's something I really fallen in love with. So the next day, I went to the meeting to decide if I was going to sign the papers to do the promotion or do something else. And I just left. I was like, all right, it's my last day in corporate America. I said, I came home. I was living with my parents at the time. And I walk in my parents' room, like, okay, how's your promotion? I didn't even tell anybody yet. I knew they're gonna be pissed. And they're like, actually, fun thing, I'm actually gonna be working at the grocery store I worked at in high school. I'll start training people, but I'm gonna go become a pro. And my mom was so mad. She turns over in bed, looks at my dad, and says, talk to your son. And the fast track part was like I told him, I said, hey, if I'm not in the UFC within 2 years, I'll go back and get my CPA. I'll train jujitsu, go to practice when I can, but it won't be anything like this. But if you just give me 2 years, I'll move out, get my CPA, and that's it. And I'll just be an accountant. And that was that. So, funny enough, my first year as a pro, I had like 5 fights within about less than 6 months. And then my sixth fight was the contender series that year. And I beat Kalen Hill. And funny enough, I just read an article on it. I never even saw it, but I think it was like a 750 underdog. And I thought I was gonna get it. Fun fact, I guess Dana White was like, "Hey, if one of these other organizations sign him, he's green. It's on YouTube still because he'll be a world champion one day, possibly, or definitely top five." And it's pretty cool to see where we are now. And I'm so grateful that I'm in PFL. But that was still a catalyst in my career, and it's been cool to make in the UFC in 1 year of training. But God had a different plan.
Sure, sure. And believe me, I plan to talk about your PFL journey too, but I'm just trying to get a little bit of background on you, if you don't mind. You're when you went 2-2 in the UFC, and is that the point? Does your contract end, or did they let you go? Because I know that usually it's 4 or 5 deals.
Yeah, so it was 4 deals. So I was 2-2 in the UFC, but I wasn't getting any fights, and they didn't necessarily just like cut me like, oh, here. It was like 3 months later, after that last fight, and I was just like, waiting and waiting and waiting. And I remember mentioning to my agent at the time when I used to be with the guy Lou DeBona with first round. I said, hey, if they're not gonna give me a fight, let me fight somewhere else. Like the next day, they were like, all right, bye. It's like, oh, well, that's fine. I just wanted to stay active because I felt like I was still pretty new in it. It's about like 3 years training at the time, and I needed to get fights. My contract came to an end, and I wanted to get more fights, and it kind of became a simultaneous agreement that I was going to be out the UFC. Uh, it was harder for them to find me fights. I remember being told like a lot of guys said no. Um, Maybe like a wild card because there wasn't much background on me, but I was still winning fights. So it was kind of weird. I lost the fight to Buckley off the kick, and credit to him, it wasn't lucky, but it was still a big kick, and it was a close fight before that.
Hard to,
Uh,
a hard kick to prepare for. No one really sees.
Right. Yeah. I didn't see that. And I could have done better. So it's like all that. And then it's the fourth fight. Then I won at a new weight class and then I lost. So I think the UFC is like in a different position too. Like we don't know who's gonna go up, who's gonna go down. And I always believe I was gonna go, I was believing be champion one day, but they have to see it too. So I didn't do my job like I needed to. I think if I was 3-1, I'd have probably stayed. But if I was 3-1, I wouldn't be here today. So it's like one of those things you look at it then, I was kind of sad. I look at it now, I'm like, oh, that's all works out.
Sure, sure. And you like you said, you get 2-2. Um, you move on. You have a fight with Eagle FC, split decision, doesn't go your way. You miss weight for this one too. Was welterweight just kind of just too hard to get consistently?
Yeah, no, welterweight was challenging for sure, but I guess on the Eagle fight they didn't open the sauna room at that night. They closed it, so that was a whole thing. And I remember like making a big deal about it. And I'm like, it all worked out, and I really believe I won that fight. But when I look back on it, it's like, yeah, tell the truth, at the night, like I was a call and I still have a record of it. Like, hey guys, like, can you open the sauna room through the night? He never closed it on the fight. And I was very unprofessional, so I was like pushing to make weight that day before, and then I needed all the time I could get and trying to find a sauna. I went to this. It was in Miami, and there was this all guys like nothing to insult anybody, but it was like a men's only sauna, if you can imagine what that is. And I couldn't find a sauna that was open late at night. And we're not together with the girl I was dating at the time. We go there, I'm like, hey, I got to make weight, and the guy goes, um, she can't come in. I was like, wait, no, forget this. I'm not cutting weight here. So I found this 24/7 fitness and the sauna didn't turn on. It was a trip just trying to make weight for that fight. So that whole week was was a challenge. When I look back on it, I can laugh now. But 70 wasn't too bad. I would say I never grew up cutting weight, so weight cutting was always a little challenging. Like at 70, 85 was fun, but 70 was just a good amount of weight for me, especially now that I fight a light heavyweight. And I've always been like the biggest I've ever been when I played college football was 245, and the smallest I ever was 196. So my body to hit 170 hasn't been there in a while. So it had its ups and downs, but I enjoyed the weight class though. It was a lot of fun. Like that's one of my favorite weight classes to fight in.
Sure, sure. Now, where are you at mentally? Like once you're coming off again another loss here, and it's you're out of the UFC, which you seemed
Yeah.
okay with, but also now you lost what 3 out of 5. It's kind of a tough spot to be in for a young fighter. Where are you at mentally?
Mentally, life was just it was more challenging. The fighting wise, I was just like back on the grindstone, like get back to it. I mean, like when I lost that Buckley fight, I was back in the gym on Monday. It didn't bother me. I never like I was gonna skip weeks of training. When that ego fight happened, like, the overall consensus and then making me like, yeah, I won that fight. Okay, cool. So I just knew I had to keep getting better. So I wasn't really in a down place. And I remember even that fight too, Coach Jones came up to me after, and I was upset because they said it, I got the split decision not in my favor, but I he was proud of the growth that I had, right? Grappling wise, putting it up and down. Now it's just like certain things that I had to tweak to make myself a better fighter. And when I look back on it, like even that time, it just really inspired me and motivated me to just keep pushing because I knew we were close to getting somewhere, right? Uh yeah, I didn't think that my though that 3-5 time of three like winning 3 out of the last what's it, 8 fights or whatever it's 3 out of 5 fights. I was like, like I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna figure it out. So I just got back in the gym, and I get back to the gym every morning. I'll be in the gym 6 a.m. by myself, right? Then at that time, I started like losing a lot of money. I had to let go of this job that I was doing because I had to pick between them and fighting, so like a big portion of my income. You hear the story about me. I'm living in my car at the time, but I didn't want to move back to North Carolina. Like I just my parents were like, you can go back to North Carolina. I didn't tell them. I was like, I'm at my teammate's house where I got a place. I didn't want anybody to feel sorry for me, but I was just like, I'm gonna make it happen. I didn't move to Florida just to turn back and go to North Carolina now. So that was my main thing, and I was actually really at peace. I was just like, I'm just gonna keep training, keep training, keep training, begging, calling everybody out for a fight the most respectful way that I can, and I just said, when my name's called, I'll be ready. And I was pretty peaceful, but I was just like kind of like wondering, like, God, is this what you want from me? It was like, okay, I did the UFC thing. Now you go back and do your accounting and do that full time. And I just didn't feel like that was a calling on my heart. I just knew I needed to keep getting better and started working with Coach Dieter, who really changed my life. And my coaches and training partners got around me, and I'm very, very grateful to them. And like I've been thinking about that a lot this week, actually.
Sure, sure. And you seem to you're a very introspective sort, and you're very even keeled. Every time I've seen you, every time I've spoken with you now, you're very even keeled. It doesn't seem like you get too high or too low. Is that accurate?
That's true. Yeah, that's funny. That's actually one of my sayings. Every time you ask me, I'm like, I'm not too high, I'm not too low. That's just full of joy, man. Like no matter how life is going, like I have a pretty joyful perspective on life, and I'm just at peace, right? It's I know who I am, I know whose I am, and I just know that one day it's all going to work out so long as I stick with it. And some days are more challenging than others, but I would never call it hard. And that's kind of kept me steady through it all.
Sure, and of course you do get back on track. As we
Yeah.
all know, you get your win. It was last July. You're back at middleweight now. Yeah, tried out welterweight. When did you start to get on PFL's radar for the challengers here?
Oh my goodness. So I fought Jared Gooden. He was back in the UFC and he's doing well, but I got the knockout. Grateful first round. And then it was probably like that was in what July or June, I said?
Last
June?
July, yeah.
July. So I didn't get the PFL called to the end of last year, going into 2023. So like end of mid December. So I was just calling everybody out. I was calling out heavyweights, welterweights, middleweights, light heavyweights. It didn't matter. So as long as I could get a fight, UFC, whatever. And I called out over St. Preux. I said, I put out a post, whoever, wherever, whenever. And then at the end of last year, my agent called me. I was just chilling and begging for a fight. And I remember Delano fought in the PFL final. And I told PFL like a fight, well, we don't have middleweight, and we don't think you want to go back down to welterweight and fight 4 times a year, 5 times a year at welterweight. It's like, yeah, definitely not that many times at welterweight. I didn't have the system down for that. But I said I'll fight a light heavyweight, and then oh really? And that was like my first conversation with him, right when Delano was going to Wales, and then after that, when he was going to fight in the finals in New York last year. And then I got the opportunity. And then I got the opportunity to fight on the Challenger Series. It was the one of the last weeks of it. This would be ready to go. End of I think it was March I fought. And we getting March, and then here we are today.
Now, you know, you being someone who's, got some UFC experience under your belt, you might be the only one I can recall off the top of my head who actually was on the Challenger Series, but also had as many fights as you did on the UFC. It's a little bit of a different thing. Did you see it in any sort of, you know, man, I really ought to just be part of the PFL, or were you just happy to kind of earn your way in anyway?
Yeah, at that point, I was like, man, I just want an opportunity to fight. Like, I don't care. Like, I didn't care if it was Challenger Series. Before the Challenger Series, like when I first signed for it, I was always saying Challenger to Champion. Like that was it. Like that was I would write it down and look at it, and I said, okay, fine. I'm gonna be Challenger. I'm gonna become champion. I didn't know how it was. I don't know. At that time, I thought I was gonna get my contract and then go straight into the season. I didn't know that I'd be considered for an alternate and then I have to fight another fight to get that when I fought Corey Hendricks. But I just looked at it like, man, give me an opportunity to fight. And I didn't see it as negative. People were like, oh, but you fought the contender series already. Now you're fighting on the challenger series. You don't feel like that's like a disrespect? I'm like, no, like I'm getting paid to fight. And you take away everything. You take away the show, you take away the lights, you take away it all. You wrap your hands and you go fight. So I was just happy I could do what I love again, really. So when they offered me the challenger series fight and all that experience, it was actually pretty good for me because I've been there before. The two times in the contender series, I was like, it's not bigger than I need to make it bigger than it is. It's got to go beat this guy up and move forward. And I was just so much at peace that it paid off for me. And I had faith. I knew God didn't bring me that far just to let me just come there and then go back home. And we've been putting in the work. I was putting in the work. I never missed a day in the gym, like unless I was sick or something. I never missed a day in the gym, even when I didn't have a fight. I was training year round, getting guys ready for camps from like Gregor Rodriguez, Brendan Allen. When Philip Halls was at the gym, like I was like technically getting in fights all the time. It was just not getting paid for them. When that time came, it all paid off in March of this year. And I'm so grateful. And then I think it was cool because the Challenger Series kind of like introduced me to the PFL in my own way. It kind of made me like, oh, this guy's part of the PFL. Whereas if I just came from the UFC, be UFC guys in PFL. So it was kind of a getting a clean slate with a new organization and some people that I really really care about. Like Gabby's here on this call, and you meet people like Tawny and Eduardo Bree. Like you can go through the list of the people that work through PFL, and there's some awesome people. And I cornered Evan Espinoza a couple weeks before that, and then before I fought, and then I fought. So it was just kind of cool seeing people that I get to talk to on a regular basis now, and then they're just super super cool with me to this day. So I'm just like I'm really happy that I found the Challenger Series when I look back on it. And I was saying I think cool if PFL had like a longer season because I just love to fight. So I got that extra fight that I wanted this year. So I'm
There
kind
you,
of
yeah, there you go. But you get that win, of course. But you weren't the only guy who had a finish on that card, and he actually finished faster than you. So were you a little nervous, kind of waiting to find out is it going to be me or is it the other guy?
no, I wasn't nervous. I believed at the time it was mine. I was like, let's go, like whatever. And I like Taylor. He's cool. Like Taylor Johnson. We still catch up. He had another kid or something, I think, or something like that. So he's been busy, but he's another farming guy. He does horseshoeing and all that stuff. So we've been talking about catching up, and he makes blades. So we still catch up. But I maybe like to buy a knife from him after this fight, But super cool guy. But when he got that done, it was cool because he finished the guy. I was in the last fight, and he was walking past me, and he goes, "Hey, I got done. Now go get yours." And I just said, "I will." And then I got the knockout. He's like, "You got it done." So we were waiting to see, and we were kind of having a laugh about it in the cage when they came to decide between the two of us who'd be going into the next fight and the season and all that. So yeah, it wasn't any pressure. I just thought it was. I believe that was my time and that the season's mine, and I'm grateful that it's staying true.
That's wonderful. I mean, that's great to hear. It's always nice to hear about the kinship among fighters and that kind of thing. And when you get to light heavyweight, though, this is your first time fighting at light heavyweight. How did it feel? Did you feel like did you feel small? Did you feel fast? How did you feel it?
Yes, I mean, I just know like typically I'm shorter than most light heavyweights. Smaller than him, yeah. I guess you could say like Martin Hamlet was a massive guy, like he grabbed me and I remember feeling his one arm wrap around my whole body, and I was like, wait a minute, this is different. It's just like a different feel. Corey Hendricks was the first guy that I fought like as like a in the PFL's regular season. That was a showcase fight. he was bigger than me too. But when it came down to strength wise, or when it came to feeling power, they didn't feel. I feel like they're lightweights who hit harder than some of these guys, and just like how they hit you and where they place the shot. So it didn't bother me. I know I'm faster than a lot of guys, more athletic, and like I'm down to fight. Like my will to fight, I think is there's more credit to that than like my athleticism and strength. And I'm just gonna go out work out, hustle out, fight that guy. So whoever it is. When I first fought, actually on the Challenger Series, though, Osama grabbed me, and I was like, this is a little bit different than welterweight and middleweight. But then I was like, okay, let's settle in, and then we got the finish. But I never really felt too much of a disadvantage, and still haven't until this day in any fight.
What are you walking around at like these days?
I mean, shoot, maybe 210. Some days like I finish practice and I'm under. Like I think I finished training sessions and I've been like 203, and then I can get big. I can get to 217, 220 pretty easily. But generally I say 210.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so pretty much on for weight cutting, you're really just kind of skipping a meal or two, maybe have a lighter meal like that week, and then that's it, right?
Yeah, pretty much I go for a walk. I'm in the shower on my weight. Like I'm like, oh, okay, cool, let's go. So I'm usually getting to eat up all week and stuff like that. When I was in Atlanta, I had some Chick-fil-A and when everybody else was cutting weight. So it was a pretty good day.
And this is going to be on Thanksgiving when you're got to weigh in. What are you going to do? Because like it's tempting to try to have a nice meal, but also you don't want to be too sluggish, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I'm there to I have a job to do. So for me, I'm on a mission. Like I'm gonna host a pretty cool like Thanksgiving amongst my team and some of my family who'll be there. But I'm not gonna be overindulgent or anything like that. I'm just gonna have what I need for to claim the victory on next Friday. And then after the fight, when we have our hands raised, then I'll have some good food. I'll have maybe some brisket. Brisket's always like my go-to. I love barbecue, but I'm not really oh, I got to eat so much and overeat. I want everybody else to have a good time, and that means a lot to me.
Barbecue's my stuff too, right
Yeah,
on.
right.
So we talked before earlier in this conversation about the activity level, right? You started out with 6 fights your first year. You've
Yep.
had 5 fights now, or you will have your 5th fight this year. Between then, you only had 7 fights in the other 3 years of your career. So how has it been kind of adjusting to getting that more active schedule again at the PFL?
Gosh, it feels like I'm doing what I love again. Like I'm looking on a warpath. That's why I'm so grateful for PFL. I tell people, like, people always ask, like, do you want to go back to the UFC? Do you want to do this? I'm like, no, like I have to wait every 4 months to fight. That's not. This is not me. Like I'm not. I love the PFL. I love the people I get to work with, and I love that I get to stay active. I also love that I get to earn it. Like it feels like, oh man, I'm doing what I love again. Because 7 fights in 3 years, you're just like, oh my goodness. And that year before COVID year, I had 11 fights drop between the second time a contender series, got the guys say yes, or they drop a fight, or say no, whatever. It was just fights kept dropping. And then it was right when the travel restrictions happened during COVID. I was gonna fly to fight, and that weekend they canceled travel restrictions. I was gonna fight and get the LFA title. So I was like, oh my goodness. Like, so I was waiting for a fight, and then I fought contender and all that stuff again. But no, like it just feels like this season kind of reminds me of why part of the reason to why I fight and why I got into it. And I just love staying active. So it feels good again. It feels really, really good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You were thinking going into the semifinals that you either wanted to or you were hoping to face Josh Silveira in the final. You now have standing in front of you. He's the guy between you, the title, the money, all that stuff, right? I know you're a pretty even keeled guy, but is there a part of you that we're not seeing that's maybe still trying to grasp the big stakes that are here?
Nah, it's like I know it's mine. And I respect Josh, I respect his team, I respect everybody at ATT. Got some friends there, right? All that. But all that aside, like I have a job to do. And fighting brings me peace in a funny way. Like when you close that cage, it's a lot more peaceful than life. Like I have a pretty solid life. I live a great life. Like nothing like, oh, what was me? Especially when you look at what goes on in the world at times too. Like I have a solid life, whether it's been in a car, on a farm, or in this house that I'm in now. Like I'm happy, but I'm a person who needs to fight. Like I love it. So it's like, yeah, there are the stakes there, but I don't see my life stopping right there. I don't see it being one of those things like, okay, like you got the $1 million now, you can just chill back, get back and relax. Like I have a goal to get 12 plus titles for PFL, season form. Like I love that. If PFL goes away from the season form, whatever, but like I want to be known as one of the greatest to ever do it. So this is like that first step in it. So it doesn't stress me out. Like I set much higher expectations for myself, And I respect Josh. Let's say he gets hurt and somebody else is in there. Let's say if I broke my hand, God forbid, I don't care. All I know is that at the end of the day, I get my hand raised. So like I'm just more looking forward to doing what I love, and that's it. So patiently waiting to unleash is what I say, because it's like it's been 15 weeks since I got to be in a fight, so I'm ready to get back in it. But who's counting, right?
Yeah. Oh well.
Right. So no, it doesn't stress me. It's not where I see my validation. Like I want to. It's not the going for the win. It's like fighting for victory, but it's also just I want to dominate. That's it. That's it. Finish my hands raised in a dominant fashion.
Put on your analysis cowboy hat here for a second. Break down how you two like the matchup here. I want to know how you perceive this, you and Josh.
Yes, I respect Josh. You know, Josh is good everywhere, right? You know, he's got some interesting striking, right? He has a multitude of like grappling assets to his advantage. What it's wrestling that he has is wrestling and grappling experience. He's done a lot of jiu-jitsu, his father, everybody. So that's gonna be a very intelligent fight, right? I have to be patient, be aggressive. At the same time, too, I can't be overly aggressive or overly um, greedy in any position, right? Just dominate from the get-go. I see that my speed, athleticism, fight IQ, and the coaches that I have with me all coming together and really having like a dominant fight in every single aspect. At the same time, too, really respecting what Josh does well. He has his kick, he has his, like I said, his grappling, his clinch work is solid, right? So just being mindful of that and treating everything as a trigger. I see me putting him away decently early within the first 2 rounds, third round, right? The latest, but I really believe like I really see a first round finish coming. I'm not gonna rush it. I'm not gonna be disrespectful to him and what he's prepared for. I know he's gonna be ready, and I assume he's gotten better, right? He's definitely gotten better since the last fight. He's got a great team around him. But I know that like with my discipline and focus and keeping myself in a great position throughout the entire fight, I'll dominate everywhere and get finish with my hands raised.
And I know you see that early finish, maybe even by the middle of the fight. But this is a 5 round fight. In theory, it could go deeper. How do you feel about the prospect of it going late in that? How do you feel like you because you're not cutting a lot of weight. It's not like you're gonna be kind of running on fumes because oh man, you just suck your body dry. Like how do you think this 5 rounds matches up with you?
Oh man, I love it. If it's 5 rounds and that's the plan that God has, I see it being a very, very dominant 5 round fight. And me consistently selecting my shots, being intelligent and controlling the fight on the way how I want it to go, imposing my will from the beginning to the end, uh, being smart, being in when I'm in, being out when I'm out, and just keeping my feet moving the entire fight. Like I know I can go for 50 minutes if it's the case plus. So like I'll be pushing the pace all fight and until that last bell rings.
And the last question I have for you, everyone's always asking, what are you going to do with the money? My understanding is you're going to be very smart about it, make investments, some philanthropic pursuits. I understand as well. But you've also talked about wanting to own that ranch someday, right? Is that something that might be able to happen sooner than later? I don't know what the cost of a ranch is in Florida or wherever you're looking, but does that become a reality now, or is it just closer to it?
I think it's to be closer to the reality. There are some other things that I want to do and be smart first. I'd like to maybe by the end of 2024, 2025, have my first farm ranch property or it's like homestead style with like a property big enough to have that much space. I can like hunt, grow, and cultivate everything that I eat. Got some learning to do, but I'm not gonna just jump to it right away. I want to be intelligent, like make the right investments. With the Live Wealth Group, I want to uh, really consider the people around me, my training partners, coaches, and reinvest back into myself as a fighter. I mean, my focus is to get better. Like, there's so much I can get better at, right? Like, I could claim this victory, but I know there'll be so much more I could still refine. And once you get the title, it's like, okay, now how do you go repeat that on a season format? And how do you be patient? So, uh, the fun thing that everybody asks me, like, what will you buy? Probably like a new motorcycle and a shotgun. I'm doing a motorcycle ride. Yeah, so we're doing a motorcycle ride from Virginia to possibly New York, but definitely Virginia to North Carolina to Knoxville, then Knoxville down to Atlanta, Georgia, doing a collaboration with Triumph Motorcycles. So they'll have a bike for me on fight week and all that stuff, and I'm gonna bring it to Airbnb. So I'll probably end up getting like a new motorcycle when I get back to Florida, but that's about it. Nothing crazy. I'm not here to overly spend or be the broke athlete. You can't do that.